Luke Russert stepped away from a successful career in broadcast to find himself searching for answers when it came to life, career, and dealing with the passing of his father, the legendary broadcast journalist, Tim Russert. Luke, thanks so much for your time today.
Happy to be here.
The title of your book, Look For Me There, the title actually a nod to your dad.
It is. It dates back to 1994. I was a 9-year-old kid, and it was a hot mid-Atlantic humid summer day at Oriole Park at Camden Yards, and he was holding my hand, and we were walking through the concourse, and there was a crush of people, so we got separated. I fell back about 10 yards, 10, 15 yards from him, and he looked back, saw me, sprinted, and he put his hand around my shoulder and grasped my wrist, and he said, "Hey, if we're ever separated, look for me there." And he pointed to a hot dog stand with an Oriole bird on it. And then he said, "But we'll never be separated." And so it's a fitting title because I think I was looking for my dad for a long time, looking for that acceptance to be my own person, independent of him. But it's also something that's very authentic and something that he said, oftentimes picking me up from a rock concert or the airport. You know, the coffee shopper who used to pick me up from the airport is still there in DC. And every time I walk by it, I see the ghost, and it's a nice ghost. I enjoy it.
Let's talk a little bit about going to 67 countries, needing to step away from your career, needing to find yourself. Tell me a little bit about that process.
So I was in broadcast news for 8 years, and I got into it right after my father passed away. A lot of the reasoning was to maintain his legacy. I felt it was something that gave me a cure for misery, which was hard work, but it also kept his flame alive. And I got to a pretty successful place. I won an Emmy. I was covering Congress for NBC News. I was on a first name basis with all these important, powerful politicians and making my way. But I didn't feel fulfilled because I didn't know who I was independent of the name, independent of that Washington world that I grew up in. So I decided one day after turning 30, I thought that was old back then. It's not. But I decided that, hey, you know what? I got to know who I am and what I'm about. And I decided to start traveling, maybe measure myself up against the world and see how that would go. It was only supposed to be about 6 months. It turned into a 3-year odyssey. But in the course of that journey, I was able to figure out, okay, who are you and what are you about, and get to a place of peace about losing dad. And the intersection of running away from grief, but also searching for identity, is really what the crux of the book is about.
And especially too with Father's Day weekend approaching us, and a lot of, emotions tied, not just to you, but to guys all around, because people may not have been as close to their fathers, or their fathers might have passed, or their fathers might have remarried, or maybe they don't live in the same city. And I think you can grieve that relationship. And this is a perfect book to pick up, because there could be times where you could still mend a relationship or find answers or just find peace within yourself.
I've been so humbled by the outpouring of letters that have come into me, and some of them have detailed difficult relationships with their fathers in their life. But ultimately admitting that relationship, no matter what it looks like, is deeply impactful for the rest of your time on this earth. And that's one of the things I always encourage people is, one of the themes of the book is I re-examine the relationship and get to understand it. Mine was very positive, but I get to see more of who my dad was, independent of just the role of dad. I get to see that in my own mother. My relationship with her actually improves over the course of this journey because I understand who she was, independent of the role of mom, independent of dad's wife at the time, et cetera. And I think that's such a useful exercise that we can really use in our lives, which is try to understand our parents and their origin stories. Because there was a day where they were just like you and me, right? Before they went into what is the most important role objectively. So it's something I was very fortunate to have done. And I actually wish I had done it younger. I think a lot of times in your early 20s, you don't really grasp onto it. It takes the seasoning of years to be like, oh man, what must it have been like for my parents to bring me into the world at that time and then have me around? And was I difficult? There's a lot of things that you have to start processing a little bit.
And just since you mentioned the early 20s, one of the things that I picked up from the book and from your conversations is mental health. And sometimes we ignore that in our guys, and we ignore it, when men are in their teens, in their 20s, and, all through periods of life. And no one really asked you after your dad how you were doing. No one took the time. You didn't know maybe that there were resources that you could have searched for at that time. Talk a little bit about maybe any kind of guy who's going through anything, whether it's with their father or on their own, to make sure that they're looking after their mental health.
Well, thank you for asking about that, because I think it's very important. I think oftentimes young men are taught that vulnerability is weak. You must stay strong. And when my father passed away, there was a lot of well-meaning, nice guys who said, stay strong, be there for mom. And I did. And that's important. And there's an element of that. But oftentimes you also have to be there for yourself. And if you're staying strong so much for others and you're not processing the feelings that you have, you're going to end up with a very heavy weight of grief that will show itself sometimes when you least expect it. And I carried that weight for a long time. I was hesitant about going into things like therapy or grief counseling or talking about those emotions because I was a guy that was be strong, stay tough. I played football for 8 years growing up, baseball, just rub some dirt on it, get back out there. That was sort of the mentality. And it wasn't until I really started to travel and I had some of these cathartic experiences around the world, and I actually took the time to sit in that pain for a moment about grief and loss, that I realized, man, this is a really difficult load to shoulder for all these years. It'd be good to understand it and hopefully at some point be able to let it go a little bit. And I just encourage young men out there, it's not weak to ask for help. It's not weak to say, I'm not feeling okay today. And believe it or not, other generations did it in their own ways. It's not just like sort of newfound phenomenon. But I think there's now a growing culture of being able to talk about it more openly, and that's good.
Awesome. Well, Luke, thank you so much for your time today. Look for me there, Grieving My Dad and Finding Myself, in stores now.
Thanks, Rudy. Appreciate it.
Thank you.